So as Rick said, my name's Lauren DeMarkey. I'm the physiotherapist at BC Children's Hospital in Vancouver, and I'm also the current vice president of the Canadian Physiotherapists in Hemophilia Care. So it's my pleasure to introduce the next two speakers, and they're going to talk about, I think, something that is extremely important all throughout the lifespan. A new approach to choosing sports and activities. So Julia Brooks graduated from the University of Manitoba in 2003 with a Bachelor of Physiotherapy. She began working in hemophilia care at the Winnipeg Children's Hospital under the tutelage of Kathy Mulder. She moved to Calgary in 2006 and continued her work in hemophilia at the Alberta Children's Hospital, originally seeing adults and pediatric patients in the combined clinic, and then continuing with pediatrics when the clinic split a year and a half later. Julia's passion is keeping kids active and strives to do this with all of her patients. She tries to model this behavior by participating in multiple sports and activities and promoting a healthy, active lifestyle and decreased screen time. She has two kids who are annoyed that their mom restricts their screen time, but enjoy being active with their mom. Jeremy Hall is a patient at the Northern Alberta Clinic with severe hemophilia A. He's the youth representative on the Alberta chapter's board of directors and has just completed the Step Up, Reach Out leadership program for youth with hemophilia. Jeremy graduated with a Bachelor of Mechanical Engineering from the University of Alberta in 2014 and is currently pursuing a master's degree in biomedical engineering, with his research focused on lower limb biomechanics. Despite having both knees completely fused, activity and sport are a big part of Jeremy's life. During his undergraduate studies, he was an avid participant in the intramural program at the U of A, twice finishing at the top 5 for cumulative athletic points in the men's division. Most recently, Jeremy became a national champion as a member of the Alberta Provincial Sledge Hockey Team that won gold at the 2017 Canadian Sledge Hockey Championship in Montreal less than 2 weeks ago. So I'll get Julia and Jeremy to come up.
So we just want to say thank you to CHS for having us speak today, and thank you to Erin McCabe for volunteering us to do it. Oh yeah, to use this magic thing. Okay, these are our disclosures. So this is our introduction slides that you can see what's in store for you. Hopefully Jeremy and I will be able to keep you somewhat entertained as we whip through the next 15 to 20 minutes. I only have mom jokes, so Jeremy's going to have to pull his weight in the joke department. In the past, this topic has proved to be a fairly controversial one, and so we hope that this talk can create some constructive and meaningful dialogue. Previously, we've used a variety of methods to help us sort of guide people with hemophilia to safe sports and activities. I've listed a couple of the more popular ones that we've used in Canada, such as green light, yellow light, red light, think once, think twice, think again. Jeremy put this super awesome graphic in there. I love it. And these aren't bad methods. They just maybe didn't tell the whole story, and certainly potentially didn't neglected to look at the whole individual and their family.
All right, now I've always been a very active individual. I've tried a ton of different sports, and emphasis on the try because I wasn't often very good. But here are 3 that I would kind of classify more as red light activities, just given their potential for injury, I guess. And so, first I started skiing with family and friends, just going to the local hill, a few mountain trips here and there, but mostly sticking to a lot of the easier runs. And then, my friends started to get a lot better, and they started to go on some of the more advanced runs. Now, then going to university, a lot of those ski trips became synonymous with drinking and partying. And so at that point, I kind of realized that this probably wasn't the best activity to continue. Next, after attending a track and field event at the U of A, just an intramural recreation type thing, I was actually approached by the track and field coach who mentioned she had some ties to the Paralympic team, and was impressed by my athletic ability. And basically, walking away from that meeting, she basically had me sold that she'd train me. I'd be attending the next Paralympics and walking away with the gold medal. So of course, who wouldn't be in? It didn't take long though to realize that throwing these heavy objects just to go pick them back up again wasn't particularly entertaining. And on top of that, there was a lot of strain on a number of my joints, like my elbow, ankle, and the knees. So again, I decided that probably wasn't the best sport to continue. And now we come to the biggest one for me, which is hockey. We do live in Canada after all. And so, it was huge, or growing up in a small community was huge to my family, my community, myself. And so I grew up, learning to skate, playing some hockey with my brother and his friends on the backyard rink, and then just playing in a lot of community leagues, shinny and whatnot. And then in university, I played on an intramural team. And that was all stand-up, non-contact, pretty easy for the most part. And so we'll get a little more into that one. I haven't quite given up that sport yet, but I'll turn it back over to Julia for now.
So if we look at the research, or I get somebody else to do that for me, there are a couple of areas that seem to fit with this new approach that we are proposing. One is the shared decision-making model, where the patient, the family, and the healthcare team look at the pros and cons, the strengths and challenges, and strategize a treatment plan or a course of action together. This is actually being broadly used in healthcare. I was just at a conference last weekend in Houston for rheumatology, and there was lots of discussion around shared decision-making in terms of selecting medications. So it's not unique to hemophilia in any way. The other one is comes from the sports medicine literature, and it's a decision-making framework for return to play. It's the START framework. And the model that they've proposed looks at assessing the activity, assessing the person, considering what the risk of the activity is, and what your risk, what kind of risk you're willing to put yourself into. And then that helps guide them with return to play. So both of these areas help sort of guide the strategy that we're trying to use. The center point of this approach is individualization, recognizing that each patient is an individual. And we've listed some of the different areas that talk about sort of individualization. So we treat patients with factor levels from severe to mild. We have patients with significant joint disease and others with very minimal or no joint disease. Some patients seem to bleed all the time. Other patients can throw themselves down a hill and they don't even get a scratch on them. In addition, prophylaxis has dramatically changed the bleeding rates and joint health for people with bleeding disorders. Some families, like Jeremy's, are hockey families, and some prefer to go for walks. And finally, as many of my patients tell me, not everyone likes to swim, Julia.
All right. Now, as mentioned in my intro, I do have a lower limb impairment, so both of my knees are fused. And that all started actually at a very young age, around 5 or 6, after a game of street hockey with some friends. I got a knee bleed. And, that in combination with my high inhibitor level actually, created a snowball effect and led to more frequent and more severe knee bleeds to the point where I was actually confined to a wheelchair. Unfortunately, at that point, that didn't stop the bleeding. The knee bleeds continued. And so it was decided that I would undergo a radioactive synovectomy and then a period of serial casting where, and the hope there was that, that would stop the bleeding. But, on the other hand, I was told I likely wouldn't walk again until I could get full knee replacements. So, at that point, I was looking at another 10 plus years in the wheelchair, which I was having none of. I'd already spent 3 years in the wheelchair watching my family, my friends participate in activities and sports that I really wanted to be a part of. So lucky for me, I had a great care team and a very supportive family. And so my dad and I actually moved to Edmonton from our hometown for a period of about half a year where I underwent, 2 to 3 physio sessions a year. Or a day, sorry, a day. And, and sorry to say, but, at that age, physio exercises weren't all that fun or entertaining. So we really had to work those into activities or some way of engaging myself. And one of my favorites was actually, rather than use a cane or a crutch, and while I was retraining to walk, I actually used a hockey stick to lean on. And so by the end of that period, I actually got my legs were strong enough to start walking again. That was in combination with leg braces that had the ankle all the way up to the hip. And so I was able to start walking, and not long after that point, I actually my inhibitor levels came low enough that we were able to start an immune tolerance. And so I can honestly say from that point on, up until the point right now, I've since switched to prophylaxis, but I have not experienced a major bleed since then. And so you can imagine that at this point, it's kind of like the dawn of a new era for me. I had 3+ years to make up for with. And so I played every sport, every activity there was. And, again, mostly trying. I wasn't all that successful with the majority of them, but, I was happy just to be playing. And so, I think the biggest part of that, why I was able to do that was because of my strict adherence to my prophylaxis and my immune tolerance. And I can still remember the first time I actually missed a treatment. I thought, okay, this is the end. I'm back in the wheelchair. Say goodbye to those activities. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But, it really helped cement the importance of sticking to my prophylaxis, sticking to my treatment, and making sure, I'm doing that on schedule.
So I just want to talk about some practical examples. So a couple of years ago, I went to a talk by these two fine gentlemen on my slide here. And they were essentially talking about exactly this. So John had made decisions to participate in higher risk activities and his HTC, realizing he was going to do it one way or the other, supported him to do it safely. I was really hard on John at this talk, and I really challenged him. For the record, he does like swimming, and he's really good at it. But in the end, he helped me to relook at how I approached my discussions with patients, especially with my teenagers. So, lucky for me, I got to put my newfound wisdom to practice very shortly after this talk, when a patient of mine with mild hemophilia came in to talk about playing rugby. He divulged to us that he had played football the year before and had injured his shoulder and went to a community physio because he didn't want to come see us because he was afraid to get lectured and be judged. I took a deep breath. I fought all my instincts as a healthcare provider and a mother. And with a strong urge to say no, we had a discussion. We created an action plan. What were the risks and benefits? Who would he tell that he had hemophilia? What to do in emergency? What position he was going to play? Any pre-training that he needed? What equipment he would or could wear? And what to do if he got an injury? We made a contract that he would come and see us if he got hurt. And our side of the contract was that he would not be judged and we would not lecture him. A couple weeks later, he held up his end of the bargain, and I'm really pleased to say that his mom, when he got injured, actually told him that they would just go to the local physio, and he said, "No, Mom, I have to go to my HTC." And so in he came. He had a wrist bleed, and because he held up his end of the bargain, we held up ours. We were able to treat him and rehab him back to a fully functioning wrist. In the end, on his own, he actually chose to quit rugby because it just wasn't worth it for him. I think that if we hadn't tried this approach, he probably wouldn't have come in until much later or at all, with a risk of very significant joint damage.
All right, now I started playing sledge hockey 2 years ago, initially playing on just a very low-level team. Most of the players were just working on developing their skills. With having played the sport before, not necessarily sledge hockey, but hockey, I actually progressed quite quickly. And so this past year, I made the senior team in Edmonton, and then I also made the Alberta provincial team. And so, now stepping up to kind of, if you might, that elite level, it was something I've always dreamt of, something I wasn't about to say no to. But, it was certainly something that I knew I needed to create an action plan if I was going to do that. And so, first step with that was I approached my healthcare team and, explained to them the circumstances. And, they helped me to develop a treatment plan that would prepare me for training camps or, games. And then second, I made sure that all the players, the coaching staff, and the training staff on my team were all aware of the potential risks that someone with my condition, playing on this team or playing this sport entails. And so then, in particular, I made sure our trainer always had some factor on hand should anything happen on the ice. And finally, it was just, I took some of those initiatives. They were my own responsibility, I guess. And so first, to make sure that my medical alert was up to date and that I was going to be wearing that at all times. And second, in addition to the on-ice training that we were doing, to also do a lot of off-ice conditioning and strength training. And so, the last one there, that training actually, really helped me to strengthen my muscles, my joints. And actually, I was one of the strongest players on our team, or really on the ice at any point. And so, that really helped to mitigate or lower the potential for injury, while I was playing. And so, that entire action plan, really helped me to excel without worry this year. And so really helped, me to contribute in a large, important role on our team. And we actually, as mentioned, won nationals less than 2 weeks ago in Montreal. And so, though some may not like to hear it, I'm pretty proud to say that, as a person with severe hemophilia, I'm a national champion in hockey in the greatest hockey country in the world.
Okay, fine. He's way better than me. Okay, so with all that information buzzing around in your heads, the physio group, with Elia Usan leading the charge, has been hard at work creating a new resource for sport and activity selection, which essentially puts all the information you've heard into a nice workbook format. We have a prototype, and it's very close to distribution. We hope that it will be a helpful resource as we go forward, and these are just the sections in the book. It's called In the Driver's Seat. We just have like 3 slides left, and they're fast. So this is the cover of the book, and these are the sections that will be in the book. It's made up like a workbook so that people can work through it. Those are the references, and there's me and Jeremy. And you may now direct any questions to Jeremy.